Well, what a interesting week we've had from a world stage point of view. The horrific actions that took place in the Ukraine with the downing of that Malaysian Airlines jet. Yeah, just horrifying things really. Gaza and Israel still, or I should say Hamas and Israel, still at it, trading blows as best as they can. And, you know, world leaders looking at all these things saying, wow, what can we do? But I won't talk about that to start off with this evening. What we want to carry on in the first half of our discussion this evening is I want to use chapter 11 of Daniel, and particularly verse 40, as a bit of a springboard to have a look at a series of chapters, Ezekiel 37, Ezekiel 38 and Ezekiel 39, to give us a bit of an overview of some prophecies that have occurred in Ezekiel 37, some prophecies that are yet to occur in Ezekiel 37, as a bit of a lead into what Jared's going to talk about by way of what's happening in the nations around us at the moment, and Ezekiel 38. And also want to have a look at Ezekiel 39 because it's got some really powerful and interesting things in there for us. So really wanting to tie a bit of this together. So Ezekiel 37, the rebirth of Israel, particularly, but also want to have a look at the second half of Ezekiel 37. We often in these seminars spend a lot of time on the Valley of Dry Bones, and then we seem to almost skip over the two sticks becoming one in the second half of Ezekiel 37. So I want to have a look at that. Ezekiel 38 we've covered numerous times, and again Jared will pick that up more so in his second half this evening. And Ezekiel 39, it's really should be read in conjunction with Ezekiel 38 because there's some more details about how really God enters into this whole scenario. And to me that was the biggest thing that came out of Ezekiel 39 when I had a look at it again in preparation for this evening, was really just how great God is and how much He Himself is going to be vindicated by the events that are going to take place. So, we looked last week at that verse, Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40. Now you've got your sheets here of Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40 onwards. Has everyone got a copy of those? No? Do you want to sort that out for us please, Jenna? Feel free to make notes along the side there, particularly if you've got a question. Pop your questions down so we don't miss the question and we can come back to it later on. Now, Jared made an interesting comment last week. Now, last week I talked about the first half of Daniel chapter 11, King of the South, King of the North. Okay, so the King of the North was doing various things to the King of the South. King of the South was doing various things to the King of the North. When you read from verses 1 or verse 5 through to about verse 35, 36, the comment that Jared made was, you have to be careful when you read Daniel 11 verse 40, because at the time of the end shall the King of the South push at him, and the King of the North shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, with many ships, and he shall enter into countries and shall overflow and pass over. Now, as Jared made the comment, the him there is not the King of the North nor the King of the South. Okay, so you've got, in a sense, a third party here. So you have the King of the South pushing at a third party. You have the King of the North pushing at a third party. Particularly, which was, Jared, in one word? The him? Sorry?
The Ottoman Empire.
The Ottoman Empire. Particularly, well, I fail. All right, so particularly centred in Constantinople or the area of Turkey, okay? Now, I've done that visually so you can get this concept that's between the actions of the King of the South pushing at the Ottoman Empire, which was involved with the drying up of it to a degree, and the King of the North coming against the what was remaining of the Ottoman Empire. You've got a time gap. Okay, and what we really want to do is fill in a few of the gaps, for want of a better expression, that occurs in that, as we referred to last week, in that colon, that space, that break there that was put there between them. And what I want to have a look at particularly is Ezekiel 37. Let's turn up to Ezekiel 37. I made mention that Ezekiel 37 can really be divided into two sections. This is a high-level look at Ezekiel 37. We could spend 2 or 3 nights just on this chapter. Verses 1 to 14, the valley of dry bones. In essence, Israel as a nation is reborn. Okay? Ezekiel 37 verses 15 through to verse 28, the end of the chapter, the 2 sticks. Okay, so Israel is joined together again. Okay, and we're going to have a look particularly at this 2 sticks concept, because there's some little interesting phrases that's used in Ezekiel 37 that tell us that hasn't yet been fulfilled. Partially has been fulfilled, but not yet in its entirety. So, Valley of the Dry Bones, Ezekiel 37 verses 1 to 14. If we were to read through that, we find the vision, the prophet's taking in a vision. He sees this valley of completely and utterly dry bones. Now, you can't have a more fitting example of absolute desolation than a set of dried bones. You know, we all have that vision of the cow that's dried in the dam that's run out of water, and all you've got is the skeleton that's there. When a bone is dry, there is nothing left in it. And that's exactly what we see in verse 11. Because he says unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. So when we come to prophecy, just always remember we don't need to sometimes search very hard to understand prophecy. Because the vision is shown in verses 1 through to verse 10, and then it's explained for us. So the angel says, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say. In other words, the house of Israel says, our bones are dried, our hope is lost, we are cut off from our parts. Okay, so that's an expression that the house of Israel said. They said, at the time of Ezekiel, a little bit thereafter, they're saying, look, our hope is gone. We're completely cut off. We are like this valley of dry bones. But, verse 12, therefore prophesy and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves, I will cause you to come up out of your graves and bring you into the land of Israel. Now, he's not talking about a literal resurrection here. He's talking about a nationalistic resurrection. He's talking about the fact he's going to say to the nation of Israel, you think you've got no hope. You think you're like these dry bones. Absolutely no hope whatsoever. He says, I'm going to, in effect, I'm going to open up your graves as a nation, and I'm going to bring you back to life. And he says there, I'm going to bring you into the land of Israel. And I don't think we should ever underestimate that. Because when Israel was reborn in 1948, there was a huge amount of discussion as to where they were going to put the Jews. Okay, because they didn't want necessarily to put them back into the land of Israel. Or Palestine, it was called then. Because that was just going to create, they realised, that the United Nations realised, you put the Jews back in the land of Palestine, what are you going to do with the Arabs that have been there for hundreds of years? How are you going to sort that out? So they knew it was going to be an absolute hot potato. As I said, we've said previously, there was actually talk to settle the nation of Israel, or the Jews, in the Kimberley. That was actually put forward around about the early 40s, which I was quite surprised about. I didn't realise that was actually even a viable concern. But God says, no, I don't care where you're going to think about it. You might think of parts in Africa, you might think of parts in Australia. No, I'm going to say my nation is going to come back and they're going to be placed in the land of Israel. And ye shall know, verse 13, that I am the Lord, when I've opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves. Now, an interesting little Bible marking activity would be to go through Ezekiel 37, 38 and 39 and mark in all the times where God makes expressions like this one, ye shall know that I am the Lord. Okay, this comes up time and time again. We're going to look at a few of them this evening. Okay, these chapters is God saying to his people, the nation of Israel, you want me as your God? I'm going to show you that I'm your God. And in chapter 39, he's going to say to the whole nations of the world, you want to know about God? I'll show you all about God. Okay, so here's God being vindicated. He says, verse 14, and shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live. And I will place you in your own land. Then shall you know that I am I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, saith the Lord, or saith Yahweh. So that's the first half of Ezekiel 37, the valley of the dry bones. So we have that, 1948. The nation of Israel brought back from the dead. As far as I know, it is the only nation, ancient nation, that has been wiped out of political existence and brought back into political existence. Now, I might be corrected on that, but as far as I know, it's the only ancient political nation that's been wiped out completely, politically, but then brought back into existence. Now, the second half of Ezekiel chapter 37 is this idea of two sticks. Verse 15, the word of Yahweh came unto me again, saying, moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick, and write upon it for Judah, and for the children of Israel his companions. Then take another stick, and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel his companions. Okay, so he's saying, and this, God often does this, God asks the prophets to literally do things. So he said to Ezekiel, he said, take a stick, on one of them I want you to write Judah. Okay, on the other one I want you to write Joseph and Ephraim. Now that's exactly the split that occurred in the nation of Israel in the times after Solomon. They were rent into two, 10 tribes and 2 tribes, one bit known as Israel, one known as Judah. Okay, so what happens in verse 17? He says, take them and join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand. And when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, wilt thou not show unto us what thou meanest to say? Say unto them, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand. So he's got this idea, he's saying, I'm going to bring back the nation into one nation. Now I'm going to make a comment here. We have, in essence, in the world today, 2 types of Jews. We've got Jews in the land, and we've got Jews that are spread throughout the entire world. Okay? In effect, we've still got 2 types, 2 nations of Jews. One firmly in the land, most definitely. But there's those that are out in the diaspora. You see, when Christ returns, they're all going to be brought back together. There's not going to be Jews scattered in America and places like that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Those ones you say that are out there
Yep.
by themselves, do they not want to be a part of the Jewish community?
They still...
They're going to be ostracised, so they go out...
No. They're still part of the Jewish community,
Right.
but they're not in the land of Israel. Okay, so they're very firm as being Jews,
Right.
but they're Jews in America, or they're Jewish people in Australia, or they're Jewish people in England, okay, or Africa, okay, but they're not in the land of Israel. And God's saying, I want all of my people back together again. And I'm going to bring them all back together again. All right, and then he says in verse 22, he says, I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel. So I'm going to bring them all back together again. Again, this reference to the mountains of Israel. Okay, it's not another place in the world where you could say, here's the mountains of Israel. So I want all of my people back together again. One nation. And he says there, and he says, and one king shall be king to them all. And they shall be no more 2 nations, neither shall they be divided into 2 kingdoms any more. So he says, I'm going to bring them all back together again. I'm going to give them one king. You see, this part of Ezekiel 37 hasn't happened yet, because there is not one king in Israel. It is a nation completely divided. I mean, they barely, every single election, scrape together enough to have a majority. But it's a political kingdom. Sorry, it's a political nation. It's not a king. And so we've got in chapters 37, we've got this concept of, yes, God's done this amazing thing in the Valley of Dry Bones, brought back the nation of Israel, established them in the land, but he's got more planned for them. He's going to bring them all back together again. He's going to make them one king. Why? Verse 28. And the heathen shall know that I, the Lord, do sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forevermore. You see, God's got a plan. That's the reason why he does all of these things. His plan, Ezekiel 37, is that all the world, all the heathen, the word heathen just simply means those that are non-Jews, all those, they're going to know that I've sanctified Israel. You know, so Israel is the chosen ones of God. Okay? Now that leads very nicely into Ezekiel 38. I don't want to talk about Ezekiel 38. I don't want to steal Jared's thunder for this evening. He says I can steal it. No, I'm not going to. It's all yours. All right? I just want to have a look at some verses that we don't normally look at, because we spend so much time whenever we talk about Ezekiel 38, about the opening verses, about proving who Magog is, proving who all the people of Tubal and Meshach, which is all very good and it's really appropriate. But I want to have a look at verse 18. And it shall come to pass at the same time when Gog shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord God, that my fury shall come up in my face. You know, Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40, verse 45 through to the end of the chapter, talks about that, this nation, this king of the north, he's going to overflow Israel. He's going to go down to Egypt. He's going to be absolutely established there. He's going to hear tidings out of the north and out of the east. And he's going to come back up in the land of Israel. And he's going to put his tabernacle, his leadership, between the seas, between the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. He's going to plant himself in the holy mountain. But God says, you touch my nation Israel, and something's going to happen. And we have all of these expressions of God as a literal person, and his expressions of fury coming up in his face, his anger, his jealousy. You touch Israel, and I'm going to get involved, says God. He says, in my jealousy and the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, which is the battle of Armageddon. You see, God's going to enter into this in a way that we've never seen before. You know, the battle of Armageddon is going to be absolutely phenomenal. But it's only the start. And that's one of the biggest things that we need to realise, is the fact that the battle of Armageddon is simply just the start of something that God's got greater in planned. You know, all the world's media talk about Armageddon. And there'll be lots of it at the moment going on. Particularly whenever there's a little hot spot in the Middle East, whenever the Palestinians and Israel start stashing it out, people start thinking of Armageddon. And they always paint it as if it's the end of the world. But Armageddon is just the start of God's kingdom. We need to keep that in mind. This concept of God entering into things in a way that is very, very open is stressed throughout these 3 chapters. In Ezekiel 37, God says, the heathen shall know that I'm the one that's actually sanctifying Israel. Okay? He says, I'm the one that's doing it. Everyone will know that Israel is important. Today, people mock the Jews as if they're the outcasts of the world. People either hate the Jews or they love them, but they're so much easier to hate. Okay, there's going to come a time where God's going to say, all the world's going to know that they are my people and I'm sanctifying them. I'm setting them apart. That's all sanctifying means. In Ezekiel 38, let's have a read of that, verse 23. Thus shall I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I'll be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord.